Intro
Oh, you'll
for
do
you.
the intro. All right, you got it.
Welcome to another session of DAO Governance Education Sessions. Today we are joined by Declan Brown from Raid Guild, who will be demystifying smart contracts for us and learnings on smart contracts builds at Raid Guild. Welcome.
Hi, thanks for having me. Yeah, I'm Deacon Brown, so I'm a full-time DAO contributor, more on the technical side, making smart contracts and the front-end dApps that use them, and was a co-founder of Raid Guild, one of the first members of Metacartel, and DAO House, which is the kind of the DAO community of all this that is building a lot of DAO tools. Yeah, so smart contracts. It's interesting because a lot of DAOs these days are, and really the majority of them use kind of this combination of snapshot, and so holding a token, having a snapshot, which, like the name implies, it takes a snapshot when a proposal is made, and then people vote based on their token holdings at that time. And then execution is usually left as a side effect by some team that's potentially been delegated by the DAO, or maybe the founders of the DAO. It's usually a couple people that are on a multi-sig, and then they'll execute any of like transferring of funds or running a smart contract function or something like that. Where it gets different into like DAO smart contracts, those are contracts where execution is tied directly to the vote. So there's not that kind of middleman step where you have a team that is a team of operators or admin that are running the blockchain stuff. So if token holders vote a certain way, whatever passes, it's executed right then. And so there's that bit of automation there. The DAO frameworks that are like that are the Moloch DAO frameworks like we use in DAO House and Raid Guild and Metacartel and others. And another one would be like ENS DAO. They have the ability to do execution like that. Bitcoin does that, and a couple other big ones. And so they use either the Moloch contracts or what they're called like comp like from the comp token really contracts, or Open Zeppelin governance framework governor. And so yeah, those are the kind of the two big differences, and we could kind of dive into those steps and how they're different if you wanted.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting, and like maybe what type of DAO you would kind of recommend? Maybe the Moloch DAO type of framework. Like, is there something like a limitation, on this framework, or like the complexity of it might not be like very good for, I don't know, social DAOs or something like that, but also it's not that complex and transparent for protocol DAOs. Like, maybe like how you would kind of frame like recommendations for different type of models.
Yeah, a lot of it goes into kind of the maturity of a DAO and the life cycles of DAOs. There's a lot of different things. I really lean towards the smart contract DAOs, like the Moloch and the governor frameworks, because of the transparency. You have everything on chain, and you have execution tied to the vote. There's not like a middleman that can change their mind around something, or an operator that decides to rug pull everyone, or to not listen to the token holders because it's not like appropriate with their vision, which we've seen in a few times past. But as it goes for like that life cycle of DAOs, there's a lot of different ways that a DAO gets started, right? There's like, sometimes it'll start very small, a group of people that have found some kind of purpose to work together where a shared treasury makes sense. Sometimes they start really huge, like Bankless, which was a huge community of people, and then an airdrop kind of united them all together into the single DAO with some shared purpose. But a lot of times when you're thinking about the technology, because you're right, on-chain stuff is a little more complicated and expensive, you know. So the drawbacks of on-chain are, you know, dealing with a smart contract directly can be complicated. You know, that's like when you're on Etherscan and you go to the read and write buttons, and you probably only have to do that if like there was some problem with the DApp, the application you're using, and you're like you're getting in there and messing with things that the normal person isn't really gonna want to play with. Devs like that, and devs like to use command line, and they like to write smart contracts to work with other smart contracts. But the space we're in now is much more diverse. It's not all just a bunch of Solidity geeks. So that's one thing at DAO Haus. We're really trying to make that connection from front ends to smart contracts easier. The other thing is, so once you figure out how to submit a proposal on chain, you have to pay the gas. And so on mainnet, that can vary from a couple dollars when gas is low, and when gas is totally crazy, like it was 6 months ago, it could be $100 to submit a proposal. In terms of governance, you know, like having a little, like paying a little bit, I don't think it's too crazy. You know, it makes people really mean it when they make a proposal. But then even voting on chain is going to cost some money, and you know, it may cost $1 or $2 to vote. So these are all kind of barriers to entry of on chain. When you're dealing with a large treasury and a really large, diverse group of people, having some of those barriers are arguably kind of good, because like I said, it needs to mean something. Like spending $1 to vote or something might actually be good. Now on the other side of this, there's off-chain voting, like Snapshot, and there's also there's like meta transactions where maybe the DAO as a whole pays for its members to submit votes and submit proposals and things like that, or maybe the platform or the app pays for it. So those two big hurdles: one, dealing with smart contracts directly can be very complex sometimes, and the other one is dealing with the gas costs. When you have off-chain voting, then it's basically like a snapshot. And like I said, it takes a snapshot at when the proposal's made, whatever everyone's token holdings are at that time, and maybe there's been some delegation to, like, you delegate your votes to another person or you delegate them to yourself. Then Snapshot allows you to vote on those. Snapshot proposals also can be very nuanced. Like you can have multiple choice, ranked choice voting, some quadratic kind of voting stuff. Another thing with on-chain voting, most of the time, because of the extra cost and complexity, it comes down to just yes or no votes. So back to the life cycle. When a DAO first starts, it may start really small, and at that time, it may make sense to, if you're wanting to be on-chain, for the benefits of transparency and automatic execution, you're just starting with a safe, with a 3 of 5 safe, and there's 5 of you in the DAO, then that kind of makes sense. But it doesn't scale much larger than that, having signers on the safe, because the coordination efforts to get a 7 of 12 or whatever you're doing starts to get really a lot of overhead there. You want to have 50 members in your DAO, they're not all going to be signers. And that's when we split off to having, like, for off-chain DAOs, you split off and you end up having this delegated team that manages the safe for the off-chain votes. So start small, you can be a safe. As you grow, it makes sense to layer on some kind of on-chain governance there, which can do member management and proposal management and voting execution. So I think you can
Yeah, I
also
think
go
that
the other way, you know. Go ahead.
if I may just like Andrea raise the hand. So if you have any question.
Yeah, you mentioned, and now I've lost them. You mentioned barriers are gas fees and something else. And the one that sticks in my mind is legibility. Just like somebody writes a proposal, it's in English, and I believe I know what it means. Somebody writes a smart contract proposal, I'm like, I don't know. How do I debug that?
Yeah.
Is that somewhere on your radar? Is that?
Yeah, so I think that kind of goes into the other one besides the fees was just the general complexity. And so you have two sides of this happening. When you're making a proposal on chain, the data may be stored on chain. It may be stored in like IPFS, kind of like how an NFT is, or maybe stored in, I don't want to get too complex, but it could be stored in like in an event. So smart contracts put out events, and those are indexed with things like the graph, another big DAO that uses on-chain voting. So the proposal can just be clear text or just regular text that any of us can read. And you still have to know how to like query the blockchain to then like see that data. This is where applications come in, and a lot of DAOs will have their own custom front ends to kind of parse through that data and show you what the on-chain proposal details are. DAO Haus tries to make more of a solution that can be used for DAOs to build their custom interfaces, and it has its own kind of interface there. So that's part of it. The other part of on-chain execution is you have to build like the thing to transfer tokens from one place to another. Like if you're paying 35 different people in a work stream or something, you have to make this smart contract code basically that's doing a bunch of different calls and sending tokens to all these different places, or maybe it's interacting with another smart contract which handles splitting things up. That can be very hard to read, and that's another thing we're getting better at. You can see it in like things like Safe's interface, DAO Haus interface, where we decode those transactions to try to make them a little more human readable. It'll say like the DAO sends 10 tokens to this person, 12 tokens to this person, 12 to this person, or whatever. And when you're looking at that straight on the smart contract, it may actually just look like a string of hex, which is OX 1 2 3 4 5 blah 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 blah, blah ABC, you know, like a page long, and that is very hard to read. But it holds all the data in there. It just needs to be pulled out. It's similar. I mean, the same kind of things happen in Web 2 and off-chain voting. Like the data is being stored as ones and zeros, really, but there's these layers of abstraction that make things easier for people to read. We're getting there in smart contracts, and it's getting better and better, but there is some element of that at times when you're trying to parse through all this data.
So is that like automated, like that, like you have this like string of data, and like the tool like the DAO Haus is using, it's basically like converting it automatically to like some more human readable stuff? Or it's like some core contributor needs to come in and say that's what it means actually?
We try to so usually, like, you know, when you make a proposal and you just put in the description or the details about it, that's fairly easy to decode and display to humans, and so that'll happen with the front end app. So and it may even be visible just in plain text on chain. Like if you are looking on Etherscan, you might just be able to see what the text is, the details of this proposal. A lot of times though, that'll have to be like pulled off of the data that's being indexed and like through the graph, which are you guys familiar with the graph is? So they have a big presence in the developer space because a lot of people use them. They allow kind of this like indexing of all the events that happen from a smart contract, and that is one place where we can kind of clean things up and make it more readable than to an app that wants to display that information.
Yeah, so basically, like you partially can do it automatically. It's basically what you're saying, and like some standard contracts kind of can be showed, which are like more simple. But if you have like unique, more complex contract, it probably there is no tool which will be just translating code to English.
Yeah, yeah.
Correct.
There for some, that's why standards are really important in our space, because like with an ERC20, a token, we know what the transfer function is doing, and so a front end can see like, oh, here's a transfer function. It's pretty obvious, you know. There's a source and a destination, and that's pretty easy to make even a little more friendly on a UI, and just saying like you're doing a token transfer. But there are some smart contracts aren't built around a standard. I mean, smart contracts can be built for very specific one-off needs. Sometimes they aren't verified. So this is another important step for on-chain everything, is that when someone writes a smart contract, they have to get it verified, or they should get it verified through a block explorer like Etherscan, and there's a lot of different services. That basically is saying like, okay, you've deployed your smart contract. Now tell us what the code is, and we'll compare what you're saying the code is and what is in the contract. And if it's a match, we call it verified, and then that'll like tell you all the different of the functions that are in the smart contract, like the different execute or actionable kind of things that a smart contract can do. It'll be like the transfer function, and it takes a source, the person who's sending it, and a destination, the person who's receiving it. And this is what happens when you do that. And then the code inside is going to say like, change the balance on the person that had the tokens to subtract what they're sending, and add the balance to the person who's receiving the tokens. So those are all very technical things that you don't really need to know, but the standards and knowing that a contract's verified makes it better, and it makes it easier for front ends to also kind of deconstruct what's happening, because if you're doing an on-chain proposal, someone could put in a transaction to an unverified contract. It makes it impossible for any other operators and admin-like and just blockchain tech-savvy people to audit that proposal. So every proposal almost needs its own audit, you know.
Okay, and like my question now will be like, what do you think, like how this will be progressing? Like what's the future of like the on-chain vaulting, like, and maybe also like how you and Raid Guild it's involved like in actually, you know, kind of executing on that future.
Mm-hmm. I think we're seeing a lot of experimentation with different kind of structures in DAOs and on-chain DAOs, how kind of having different work streams are becoming really popular. So it's like, you may have like a DAO, a global kind of DAO, right? Where we're all around the world, but we share this kind of mission or purpose, the thing that's aligned us. Maybe we all have a token, but we have this one shared treasury. And then you reduce the amount of kind of proposal overhead at that level to as much as possible, really. Because one of the things we see issues with on-chain DAOs is there's a lot of kind of ops work that needs to be done sometimes. Maybe you're approving a token to be sent from one contract to another, or maybe you're registering something, or maybe you're doing all the little things. And if every single one of those things has to go to a proposal, it gets very heavy on the rest of the DAO, where you get proposal fatigue, and you get just kind of people stop paying attention because it all seems way too technical. And you get a little less engagement overall. So one of the ways that I've seen people addressing this is through work streams. And so that may be a DAO that manages one large single treasury. They keep their proposals at that level to strictly like funding a delegated work stream. So it's just like, let's send 30 ETH to this team to work for 6 months on whatever their purpose is. We're delegating the on-chain control of these funds to this smaller team, maybe of like a 6 to 10 person team, to manage their funds internally, really however they want, but hopefully on-chain as well, at least through a safe or something like that. So you have, and then on the backside of that, the global DAO can be used more as a retroactive kind of signaling or grading of those work streams. Like, did this team do a good job? You know, yes or no? And if they didn't, so another nice thing about on-chain funding and combining these kind of, or the composability here, is you could have that global DAO also have control over the funds in this work streams account. You know, work streams fail for all different types of reasons. We've like really solved, a lot of times we solve for the scariest reason, which is a work stream going rogue and just stealing the money. But in reality, it's much more nuanced why a work stream fails, right? A lot of times it's just the people that had passion to do it lost the passion, and so now the funds like sit in this treasury, or there was some type of team conflict, or they couldn't get the resources, or whatever it is. So now the funds are just sitting in the treasury. Retroactively, if the DAO can say like, well, the purpose, you guys had the right purpose and we voted for it initially, but you really failed at execution, and there's still 80% of the funds in your treasury, so we're just going to take them back. And so it recycles the funding back into the larger DAO and enables it to be, you know, not just off in the dark. Now the other thing, you know, that's more automated when it's on chain and you have this composability. If it was off chain, it would just be more like, okay, whoever is running this treasury, send us the money back because you're not doing anything.
Can you please send me my money back?
Yeah, please send the money back to the DAO. You guys didn't do anything. But if it's on chain, then you can actually have those controls. The DAO would have a vote. So that could be even the vote. The retroactive vote would be like, does this team deserve to have more money to continue what they're doing? Did they complete what they did? Did they not? And we want to take the money back. You know, so it could be like that.
Yeah, and you can also like stream the budget basically, so they don't get everything at once and just like basically close the stream. When like, which is kind of I think the safest option, because when they already have the money, they can theoretically kind of just take them out. But when they just have the stream, they just close it, and like, you know, I think that's something what is happening in the larger DAOs. Like, I don't know if you are involved in MakerDAO, but there was like cases like this. Like there was like they coordinate reward assets, and they basically just said, hey, we cannot do it what we were asked to do, and here is the rest of the money from our treasury, and good luck.
Yeah.
And it's kind of fair because like it was a lot of drama around it, but like it's kind of fair. Like they spent the money when they were still working and they did something, and now they are just saying, hey, from now we just cannot do it. Here's the rest of my money, and we are like going to pursue something else. So I think like the on-chain voting at that point like really enables like that, you know, we can vote, take the money back, repurpose it, you know, and start basically again. So definitely good point. Have you seen maybe somewhere else like how that works like in practice, like when like let's say what was the process for distributing the funds and maybe then like taking back?
Yeah, and I think this goes into some of the more like where I think this space is going. It's about the composability. So you mentioned like streaming. I've seen the people do streaming from a DAO into work streams or into I guess like a contracted person to do something, or a bounty or whatever it is. But I think what we're going to start seeing, and it ties back into work streams and the composable aspect between two treasuries. And so like moving funds back into the main treasury, streaming funds. What you start also adding are layers of kind of reputation. So I think we're going to see like on-chain reputation become a lot more popular in DAOs, on-chain DAOs, because you have like an on-chain record of actually how people are spending money, what proposals they're making, how they're executing on their purpose, and then what's happening in this like retroactive kind of vote on if it was good or not. In Metacartel, we're doing some experimentation with this right now. So we started Metacartel grants. We started off as the kind of that really top level DAO where every decision, every ops thing, everything was going on chain, and we were making proposals. And we had a real large inflow of people asking for money because we're just giving out grants, application layer kind of stuff. Eventually that inflow, especially, you know, during the hype season, was it was 90% just garbage projects, 10% really awesome ones, and, you know, 15% of the projects got funded because it was just like a constant flow and a ton of overhead just to manage that kind of inflow. So what we tried to maybe flip the switch a little bit and say like, okay, well, let's start a small delegated work stream, give them some ETH, and then have them work as scouts. And so that is more like, these are guys that are working application layer of Ethereum and other chains a lot, and they're on the ground, they're at hackathons, they're talking to people, and they're just giving out micro grants, these, you know, a couple ETH at a time, and just being like, cool, like, hey, I really like the project you just showed me, or the demo you just did, or what you did at this hackathon. Here's a couple ETH. So it's, instead of them coming to apply for us, the scouts are going to find it. So they're a delegated team, and they were given 30 ETH or so to manage, and I think it's 7 people. They're managing through their own kind of governance system. It's a smaller than just managing the safe. The proposal period for the other flow would be, there would be kind of a 2-week lockup period where the vote and this grace period happen, which grace period has to do with rage quit. But there would also be another 2 to 3 week period of off-chain kind of consensus finding and soft consensus, where they're making forum proposals and they're doing these things, and then it would go up to an actual vote on chain, and then there was the grace period. Kind of going all over the place, but so Metacartel is experimenting with that. They did the first 3 months. I think it worked out really well. They're calling them chili pods, because Metacartel is like the dancing chili pepper. And so these little pods now, another one just started by Yale started it, and it's like a event, like IRL event kind of thing, which, so Metacartel is also known for MCon, which is like the big conference. And so they do conferences really well. And so trying to spread out that and creating more conferences in other places. These are both really, you know, a scout program and an IRL event program are both fit really well into the greater Metacartel's like purpose and mission of like funding early started applications and just the general vibes of Ethereum. So so far it's working well. There hasn't been a need to pull funds back, and everything seems, you know, to be working well. But we have noticed that the on-chain reputation, to bring it back to that, is something that would be valuable going forward, because keeping track of the way people are working in the pods and how people are engaged in retroactively funding it, how pod's reputation in general is working. So yeah, I think reputation, permissions is another thing I think we'll see on-chain DAOs managing a lot more. So that those are things like HATS protocol, which is kind of like owning an NFT maybe gives you the signer permissions on a safe. And so the DAO can vote to give someone this permissions NFT, and now they own that NFT. Maybe it's like an SBT, soulbound, where only the DAO can move it and not the owner. So what you can do is actually you could have one of these work streams, and the members that are controlling that safe can actually be delegated fairly easy through NFT ownership.
So regarding that kind of pods and like how you said, like you have this scouting team and you have the RL team, like do you think this like kind of model of like breaking out the DAO, like kind of the mother DAO into like small action teams and kind of empower them, it's kind of like where we are heading like in the DAO space? That's kind of my first question. And second, like if yes, do you think those pods or work streams should be exclusively working with the mother DAO, in this case like Metacar DAO, or if let's say the RL team will get another like DAO, maybe Bankless, and the Bankless will ask them, hey, can you help us with permissionless? They will be like, hey, why not? Like we already done MCon, so we have time now, so now we can work for Bankless. Is like how you envision it?
Yeah, I actually think that's one of the coolest aspects of this space is that, you know, one of these pods may spin up with a very specific purpose for their mother DAO, but really it's closer to they're more like siblings, right? They've been funded by a group of people that have a mission that this workstream can accomplish. It doesn't have to be exclusive, I don't think, and that's where I think different layers of governance, sub DAOs, are going to also become important. So yeah, I think if the IRL, they're calling it the ethos chili pod, you know, they're going to be working, getting sponsorships, doing a lot of the funding we're giving them isn't enough to run an event, but it's enough for them to get bootstrapped to where they can start building up relationships, getting sponsorships, working with other teams, or maybe even running other conferences, you know, like a one for Bankless, whatever it was. That team themselves can kind of run with however they want. There is an interesting thing here where, in Raid Guild, we actually have some different elements of this, where we have different kind of these projects that were spun up inside of Raid Guild, then spinning off into their own DAO, and a lot of times using the same branding and the same community, you know, to get started. And it was all started in Raid Guild. And so it's interesting to think about like how that relationship goes forward. Is it something that it's like, so the way the Raid Guild works is, you know, it's all these kind of freelancers that are working in the space. They're getting clients and finding teams together through this kind of Raid Guild community. And then it's voluntary, but most people will put 10% of whatever they make back into the Raid Guild treasury. And that's for Raid Guild to fund more projects that may spin up and to do operational kind of things. But it is interesting to like what happens with that relationship. Like, does the spin-off project then give 10% back of revenue, or, you know, if they go off and create a equity, like a corporation with equity, does like Raid Guild somehow get some of that equity? Is there any like fee or maybe a subscription kind of fees, or something around like being a verified project from Raid Guild? Or is there nothing? Because really, like Raid Guild is benefiting either way, because it's like expanding the community and the brand, and so I don't know. Those relationships will be interesting, and if we have on-chain kind of flow of funds, like through royalties, streaming, and work streams and stuff, it could be really interesting.
Yeah, that's super interesting. Actually, like I know, like in Bankless, there is also like, you know, there is a lot of projects, a lot of guilds, and so on. And then how actually this will kind of work together, like if it's like some projects spin off, get maybe VC funding, how bankless community can kind of benefit out of it, or should they, or are the sole purpose just like launching projects as many as possible and like just like the building the brand, or should there be some revenue stream back? Like, for example, like in our consulting practice, like we are more tight. We are like less like kind of permissionless. So every project we do for our clients, it's basically run internally. Therefore, like everything, it's like to the treasury and then from the treasury to contributors. So it's kind of easier to manage. But yeah, I see your point, and actually, it kind of reminds me like how you are growing up as a person. Like when you are like living with your parents, like parents are funding you basically school and everything, and then like after you finish the school, they're like, okay, that's end of the funding stage. Now you are on your own. You still have the brand because you still have this last name of your parents, but but then you are on your own and you need to find kind of the product market fit, and then like there is also the question kind of like, should you then like I also like kind of repay your parents for what they have done for you, or should you just keep everything for yourself? I think it depends, family by family, but like those questions actually like happening in real life like regularly. And now I feel like with the DAO ecosystem, it will be kind of similar, just much faster. It won't be like 20 years of funding. It will be like half a year, and then it will just like spin out your sun pot. And
there's
then
we have the ability to speed run this stuff, right? And that's another really cool thing about the pods, is that you can experiment, and pods can run themselves different and then share their knowledge back into this kind of central place to be iterated on.
Yeah, actually, I just had discussion with a colleague of mine over the weekend around like branding, and it's an interesting question for the like DAOs and like pods and everything. Like, should you have everything under like metacartel brand? Should everything be like chili pot or something, or like should you be more independent? Like it's kind of this like branding, like should you be like Nike, everything under Nike, it's Nike, or should you be like Unilever, where people don't even know that Unilever maybe exists, but there are so many brands under it, and like what's actually like best fit for the DAO space? Like, do you have any maybe like opinion on that?
Yeah, we've had these conversations before too, even with Raid Guild and Metacartel, because Raid Guild kind of in some ways spun out of Metacartel. Early Metacartel members that were builders kind of decided to clone it. Even Metacartel cloning the original Moloch DAO. But these are all very independent projects from each other, but there is kind of this like tie between them. So I think that is a better way to go. I guess it's going to just be like situation dependent, right? So sometimes if it's like with the two examples I gave you of the Metacartel ones, the Scouts and the IRL event one, the Scouts, most likely they're going to be pretty good for finding people to give grants to for Metacartel. So it kind of seems like that may stick there. I could see like a scouting DAO eventually. I mean, that could be something like the IRL events. I think even plays a little more into the independent venture, because they'll be doing events for kind of, even like the idea of MCon doesn't have to be strictly a Metacartel thing, I wouldn't think. I mean, it could really be whatever. So yeah, I think, and then to your point about like living at your parents' house and taking that brand off, I think there's a lot to that, especially for early DAOs, where there's like this idea of progressive decentralization, which I don't really like so much, because it's kind of like once you put a lot of power into one person or one group's hands, it's really hard to get rid of that later. And so you always have that central bottleneck or point of failure. So what we like to think of more, especially into with the MolochV3, the DAO Haus V3 stuff, is that it's more like progressive permissionlessness. So that could even, you start with a more permissioned DAO where there's like your tokens aren't even transferable, and they only can be issued by the DAO. So members can only be issued membership by a vote by the DAO. But over time, you could start as a safe, go into a kind of permissioned DAO, and then over time, maybe it makes sense then to make tokens transferable, and then it's totally permissionless for membership. Anyone could go buy tokens on an open exchange or from a friend or from anyone, you know. I think that's another thing that we may see going forward is like that idea that over time DAOs change, and for them to really stay robust and decentralized, depending on how big they are and what their purpose is, it may vary. Like token voting may work for one group, but it may be really a bad idea for another. And that's the same thing with off-chain and on-chain. Off-chain may work for one group, and for others, on-chain may be really important. So in DAO Haus V3, we're really trying to get into all those things, and we've created a really awesome smart contract. So that's the MolochV3 smart contract. The code name has been BAAL, BAAL, and we just went through several different audits. It's badass. I think, you know, we're in a beta version right now with our front end tools, but they should be coming out within the next few weeks, I think, which is pretty badass too. And so next month, we really want to just hold a lot of kind of events in the DAO Haus Discord that will be talking about, you know, what it was like to start Raid Guild and then to grow it, or to start DAO Haus, which is a product DAO initially, and grow that into more of a community thing, and what do the different things mean more on a technical thing of like making a proposal and voting, or what's rage quit, and progressive permissionlessness, and the difference between on and off chain voting, and all those things, I think, and a lot of technical stuff for front end and Solidity devs if they're into that.
Nice. So if you can drop maybe some of the links into our Telegram chat. Are you part of the Telegram chat? I hope yes.
I'm in the Discord. Send me the Telegram and I'll say what's
I will
up.
send, yeah. If you can, you know, there is 143 like governance geeks in the Telegram.
Awesome.
So it will be great, like, you know, we drop some of the links like of the new smart contracts, new front end, and also those sessions, like, because people are really interested to like see what's going on, what's new, and like also provide feedback. You know, there are people like from Maker, Safe, Gitcoin, and others. So definitely, I hope you can get some good feedback there. I will share the link here in the chat. And Andrea had questions. Listening to, or Andrea, do you want to say it on your own? Sure.
I'm poking again a little bit on the smart contract, sort of the building blocks of it. I'm still trying to listen for anything that's going to be in the contract that's not move money from here to there or permissions.
Mm-hmm.
Have you guys noticed any other primitives?
I think the kind of primitives, member management, I think, is a primitive of the DAO space.
In or out,
yeah. Are they a member or not? In a permissionless DAO, that's just owning a token. And
right, I was gonna say, yeah.
So like watching the transfer of those tokens. Some DAOs have the ability to pull tokens or to kick someone out of the DAO.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's an interesting primitive. Another thing that's a little maybe on the side is permissions, reputation. I think another big one is signaling. So there's sometimes what you want to get is more of a general like feeling of something instead of just a consensus kind of yes no vote. So signaling can be really powerful, and we see this off chain a lot, but I think on chain signaling will become really powerful too, because you can think of like conviction voting where it may be more liquid, the community's signal on if a work stream should continue to receive their stream or not. And if it drops below some threshold, maybe the stream just cuts off. And so other primitives, I think, well, maybe not a necessarily primitive, but I think things we'll see coming up more in the space is more automation. So, and AI kind of things, you know? And then work stream kind of flow, and I guess proposal and DAO flow, proposal management stuff. We're still just experimenting with all this stuff like crazy. So, you know, there's new things coming.
But conceptually, I would imagine that work streams are just a fractal representation of the DAO, unless they're given the permission to operate in a different way. You know, at the DAO level, we're going to be on chain and everything is token based, and you guys within your work stream, you have the freedom to make decisions this way. It can be off chain, or it can be, you know, wallet based or ID based or something like that.
Yeah.
So
that's interesting. Once it gets off chain, it becomes, so maybe even there's going to be more of this mix of like how to verify off chain activities. Once it gets off chain, it gets a lot harder. But the fractal representation, I think, is absolutely right. Whenever I'm thinking about making a sub DAO or a sub DAO structure, it's like, well, this also worked the other way. Like if the parent DAO wanted to create another thing above it, and would the sub DAO be able to create a sub DAO, you know? And it also
absolutely.
It's also has these, like what you were talking about before, where if a sub DAO is actually independent, that those edges go off in multiple directions too, right?
Yeah, when I've been working with RNDAO, and when we did a research around sub DAOs and why DAOs create sub DAOs and where they work and where they don't work. The tension that I am hearing is often sub DAOs or work streams will be created in order to avoid the limitations and complexity that you get at the DAO level. So anything that makes the DAO itself more nimble, faster, effective, reduces the need for the sub DAOing.
Yeah.
But anything that you impose on the sub DAO that makes it slower, less effective, then the motivation goes away and somebody's going to get dropped.
Yeah.
You know, this on-chain voting, sorry, it slows us down. It's too confusing. It doesn't work. Done. We're just going to talk and we're going to have a chat in the group, and then we're going to make a decision, and it's done. Right? There's nothing.
Right.
It's you know, never mind chain. It's not even recorded. So.
Yeah. The overhead is.
Yeah.
That's interesting. It's kind of like, maybe it's okay as you're like getting for the kind of transparency and on-chain fidelity of these smaller things, the tips of the branches coming off to, you know, as they grow, that maybe it's more about, as sub DAOs grow, they also need to start taking seriously the transparency that is also added, maybe adding a little of that overhead. Sometimes the overhead and a little slowness in governance is really good. Like if you have $10 million in your treasury, it shouldn't be just two guys deciding they can rug pull everyone, right?
Yeah, it should be more diversified.
But if they put 10K into a work stream, then those two can rug each other as much as they want.
Yeah, but I also feel there is like limitations to like how many layers you can like put together. You know, like if there is a mother DAO, sub DAO, sub DAO, sub DAO, sub DAO, it will just get too complex. So I'm like, you know, when I'm thinking about it, I feel like those DAOs will be much more like fluid. And it's also what we said kind of when we started this like Web3 stuff, like, you know, fluidity of the resources, like people don't need to just be in one company for whole life. If they feel like vibing somewhere else, they will just like kind of move on. And I think this doesn't need to be on the like one person level. I think it can be on the team level. like you have a team, and you work maybe with Meta Cartel, and then you're like, okay, we didn't MCon 5 times. I don't really want to do any other MCon. It's just like same all the time. Let's move on and do some, maybe like RO events in Asia, because we want to all move to Asia. And then I feel like that kind of sub-DAO structure won't work really well. But if it's like more independent, and you can kind of cut ties with your mother DAO and just connect to someone else and then reconnect later, that I think will be much more powerful, like for the ecosystem as a whole.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think the one thing I always thought was like in that movie Fight Club, where you have these, so like the work streams in like the 70s and anarchy or anarchist groups, there was a lot we can learn from those things, because it's more about having the kind of shared purpose and on that upper level, where really that's the thing, is just to get the knowledge of everyone and to share that around to everyone. So these smaller groups can be very independent and still feel like they're part of that larger group, but the two groups don't even need to know each other exist, right? Of these, the children or whatever. And those children could be working for 5 different DAOs if they seem like they're aligned with all those different missions. Like they don't need to know they exist. Maybe they shouldn't even know they exist, like depending on how private you want these kind of things to happen. But yeah, I think that is true.
So we have last 3 minutes. I have actually one last question, and then I would ask you maybe to like give your last thoughts about like future of governance, or maybe the V3, what you are building and what's the coolest feature there. So my last question is like, what do you think about the kind of service model what like Balancer, Aave, like, and some other DAOs might be using, like that there is no like work streams, but there is like service providers basically. Do you think like that's maybe like the way to go?
Like more like a protocol kind of thing, are you saying?
Like when like you don't have like so Maker have like coordinates structure, and they're like internal kind of to Maker, but like Balancer and Aave, they work with Gauntlet, they work with Llama, they work like with like service providers, so they're like kind of external groups, but like they are providing services to the DAO, so they're more like less sub-DAO structure and more like independent groups. Like, like if you don't have opinion on it, that's fine. It was just like the kind of third model what we have not touched upon.
Yeah, no, I've seen that happening too, and I think it's really interesting. Again, Raygill tried to, or has played around with that. They had like they started seeing that they needed different things, and I think maybe even the work stream kind of stuff we were talking about plays into that. Like, there could be an ops type of DAO that is really good at like managing the on-chain transactions and execution or whatever it is, and they could be a service provider to many different DAOs. So I think that kind of stuff, or like, yeah, a marketing team or a dev team or whatever, definitely, or an app. Yeah.
Good. So what's the best feature of V3? We have 1 minute.
Yeah, so V3, we kind of broke it up, and V2 was kind of rigid. We were learning about the space. Now that we know a little more, we took V3 and kind of broke it up and made it very modular and flexible, so that we can kind of iterate quickly and see some of these experiments like happen on chain. We're really kind of on chain maxis, so in DAO Haus. So we're trying to like figure out how to enable all the things that are happening in the space, but add the kind of robustness, transparency, and of on-chain. So with the way that a Moloch DAO works, we still have those core things, the idea of shares, which are kind of have voting and execution rights, and loot, which purely has economic rights. And then rage quit, which is the other thing. Rage quit is basically you can leave the DAO by burning your share of the tokens, the shares or loot, and you'll receive some fair share of whatever's in this rage quittable treasury. The thing that I'm really excited about here is something we were playing around with V2, but DAOs owning multiple treasuries and having these links to multiple treasuries and easily being able to manage that. So that's where you can get these kind of work stream relationships where a DAO kind of is holding on to a treasury while a different team is managing it through maybe a quicker governance or however they want to do it. But the DAO can always pull funds back if it needed to. In Raid Guild, we see this. We have like 20 different side treasuries that we play with, and because we'll get a grant from one team, we want to keep that fund separate, kind of earmarked for the things that we're going to work on. Or we get another treasury that it's specifically for a cohort, and we want to have funds kind of quarantined there and sandbox there so they can play with it. So I think those are some really interesting things. Overall, V3 is built more for developers, because what we're thinking is like the service providers, the protocols, the product developers, a DAO could really be an aspect of all those things. And if you have the building blocks, the smart contracts and the front end libraries to kind of stitch that into the product, and so bringing the community into the product, we think there's a lot of cool experiments that can happen with that. So we've really built some good stuff for the builders in the space to build even cooler stuff. Yeah, so next month we're going to tons of workshops. And we haven't like released anything on that yet, but I'll post in the Telegram once we get some more things figured out there.
Perfect. And where people can like reach you if they have any other questions, like Twitter or?
Yeah, I'm on Twitter, Deacon Bro, DEKANBRO, and in the DAO House Raid Guild or Metacartel Discords, I'm hanging out in those all the time. Mainly DAO House currently, so come by there if you have any questions or interested in experimenting with stuff.
Perfect. So yeah, we will definitely post the links to DAO House Discord under this video, and also to your Twitter, so people can find you and maybe ask some questions. Thank you very much for today's session. It was super interesting. Like, you know, we don't have that many technical stuff, but I think it's important to learn also like the technical side of DAO governance and like know how it's evolving. And it's great to see that you are building like already like third version of the contracts, and really like empowering the builders to do good stuff with DAO governance and DAOs overall. So thank you very much again, and for the rest, see you next week at the same time.
Yeah, thank you for having me. That's fun.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.